So there's a motion on the order of paper this month looking at bringing in some restrictions at the prison. I mean, tell me about them. What are you hoping to achieve with this?
Yeah, this is something that's been discussed for some period of time, and it's something that we would like to put in place with a view to having those facilities available should we need to, and it's specifically related to drones and mobile phone blocking. Drones at the minute aren't something that we've had a problem with, but there have been reported incidents in other prisons, certainly in other jurisdictions, where they've had problems with people either trying to drop illicit substances in or access and communicate with prisoners outside of the normal channels that would be acceptable. And that's something that we want to provide a way of preventing against, really. So this order would allow us to put blockers in to stop drones coming. That's something that we've also been working with the Civil Aviation Authority with regard to no-fly zones. So there's a couple of methods in which we can achieve the ultimate goal, but this is something that we would like to have there available to us should we think that the threat of that happening is real. At the minute, as I say, we haven't had incidents. It's very much a precautionary measure. And then the mobile phone blocking is rather more real, I suppose, in terms of the risk of getting mobile phones into prisons. And again, one of those things where the more high-tech our censoring equipment becomes in the prison, the more imaginative ways people find of creating miniature mobile phones out of plastic that can be smuggled in. And that's something that we're very much aware to, we're very much alive to in the prison. There's extensive searches, extensive methods in which we look into that and try to identify where they are in terms of preventing them actually coming in the first place, and then being able to identify them, find them and remove them if they have succeeded in being smuggled in. But we just want to take that a step further and prevent the ability for those mobile phones, if they have managed to get past all those measures, from being able to be used to communicate and carry out potentially illegal activity.
Now, illicit mobile phone use in prisons isn't uncommon. You see stories in the UK newspapers about it happening all the time. I mean, a block on mobile phones, what are there any additional problems that could cause within the prison itself for staff that work there, for instance?
No, the companies that we've talked to with regard to potentially bringing in these products certainly are ones where they have worked around any problems. This is not something totally unique, as you say. You do see stories of this, and I think in terms of prisons, we're probably pretty fortunate actually in terms of the low level of activity around this sort of nature within the prison. However, we are aware that it's a problem, and we certainly don't want to just think, well, because it's not happening very often, we're just going to ignore it. I'm very much keen to put things in place, and this being one of them, where we can actually prevent the signals from those phones being used. So we would still be able to use all the security software, and that wouldn't be affected by this.
Is the clampdown about stopping people from using something which is seen as a privilege, or is it to do with something more sinister?
Can be a mixture of both. I mean, obviously prisoners have access to phones within the prison, but very much controlled, and they are not mobile phones, ones that they can just keep in their cell when they want. And that's something that we want to control. And there's probably a variety of uses. Sometimes because of the way that these phones now are created, as I say, some of them are tiny. They're actually available freely on the internet now, where people have created them very specifically to beat the systems that are in place in prisons. And we are aware from other jurisdictions where they've had cases where they've been used to carry on drug use and drug dealing, other illicit activities, and we certainly don't want to be able to have facilitated that by not putting appropriate measures in place.
How much of a problem is it at the Isle of Man prison? I mean, do you have figures to suggest how often prisoners get a hold of these makeshift mobile phones?
We have certainly come across phones within the prison that have been confiscated, and we have intelligence that would suggest there have been phones in the prison, and then we do targeted cell searches based on that. I haven't got the exact figures with me.
How do you identify this sort of behaviour going on? I mean, how do you know that prisoners are using mobile phones they shouldn't have?
Some of it comes around intelligence, listening in terms of conversations, picking up on things that are happening out in the community that have to have been sourced from prison. So there's a variety of ways in which we become aware that there is some communication occurring that is outside of what would be the norm, and that's certainly where we want to pick up. And also when there are phones actually found and you've got a physical phone, so you're aware that that's there in the prison, and it certainly shouldn't be.
And would there be a cost to bringing in this sort of technology, this blocking of mobile phones and drones?
There would be a cost, and that's in the sort of general running of the prison a manageable cost. That's something that we believe is affordable, and that would be going through the normal tender process in terms of identifying the person who would be the right provider of that to meet all the criteria that we would have for the prison.
Has it ever been considered just giving people access to mobile phones? I mean, we've seen with smoking in that they've moved away from this total ban and introduced vaping. Would mobile phone use be something else you could introduce to create possibly more harmony?
I think that with smoking and the vaping, which I'm absolutely on side with, I think that was something about managing behaviours. If you force someone to withdraw from smoking very suddenly and disruptively, you actually find that their behaviour worsens, and that's obviously unhelpful in any situation. Mobile phones are a little bit different because rather than having an effect just on yourself, it just opens up that whole network of communication and those possibilities about engaging and enabling other criminal activities. So I don't believe that is a route that we'd be going down at the moment. Maybe we'll look back in 10 years and think that is the right thing, but certainly at the minute my concern would be that would just open things up just a little bit too much, and I don't think that's the right route to go down.
And we go back to drones. You say it's not identified on the Isle of Man as a problem. Putting no-fly zones in place is one thing. We see that during the TT at various places and the Festival of Motorcycling. But actually blocking them is something very different.
Yeah, and what we would like to do is, working with the CAA, the no-fly zone would be our first line. But this would give us a backup should we find that despite the no-fly zone there's been breaches of that. We would have the Viries then to be able to actually block the signal. So my understanding of it is the drones just fall out of the air as they get sort of within 10 metres of the prison. And actually this is something that Guernsey have already put in place, the same order but with the Guernsey name to it, by bringing an order in council from the UK legislation.
And are there any dangers in doing this? And we know people are apprehensive about any sort of mobile phone masts or that sort of technology in the area, in the vicinity of people living. I mean, there are a fair few people live in the Derby area, fairly close to the prison. I mean, are there any health implications for this?
Certainly not that I'm aware of. I think that the products have been well tested. They've been utilised in other areas. It's not something brand new that we're suddenly launching, with no backup, no research. So that's something that I certainly am not concerned about.